For my ally is the Force.
Coming up on the start.
I think I just figured out what the problem with Star Wars is. The problem is that Disney hasn't adjusted the content to the times. What I mean is they're still making movies in the tone of the original movies. So it's not the story or the characters that we dislike. I mean, we do, but that's not the reason that these movies feel so empty. It's because these characters and this type of story is outdated. The new Terminator movie just bombed, and even if you were looking forward to it or if you liked it, you had to know the movie wasn't going to be a success. But it failed for the same reason that Star Wars is failing. It's because we don't like this type of movie anymore.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
The Terminator franchise is honestly just two movies. They're 1980s big muscle action flicks. Well, the first one was kind of a horror movie, but they were still just classic Arnold movies. But for any franchise that's going to survive over several decades, it has to change with the times. And I'm not saying that a movie will succeed just because it changes. I'm saying that if it wants to succeed, it has to change. Think about like Godzilla or Planet of the Apes, or there's several other franchises that have been around for a long time, but you'll see there's a noticeable change in them. The tone and the design and everything changes about them. But there are some franchises that can't change, because we only like them the way they are. James Bond's been around since 1962. Well, 1953 if you count the books, but when you think about the first Sean Connery James Bond, you can see that he's a man of the times. The Rat Pack was really popular at that time. You know, that's what was cool. And James Bond was modeled after that style of man. But as time goes on, James Bond becomes a little bit more of a spy. You know, with Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan in the 90s. There was more espionage, and the villains were more dangerous and violent, and there was more technology. And then we get to the most recent James Bond with Daniel Craig, and he's basically just a straight up assassin. There's not much coolness or spy stuff happening. He's basically just going to a place to kill people and blow stuff up.
Bond. James Bond.
But the franchise had to do that because that's the type of action hero we have today. And the other one is Batman. You know, Batman's been around forever, but the first version of Batman was a zip bang pow, you know.
Holy bouncy boilerplate fits!
You know, that was basically because of social limitations in society, and, you know, comics had to be that way back then. But as time went on, Gotham got a little bit darker, and, you know, it was more realistically dangerous, and the villains got a bit more psychotic, and we started to focus more on Bruce Wayne's psychological trauma.
Why did you say that name?
And then now, the most recent Batman, he's basically straight up killing people. You know, Superman's snapping people's necks now.
Superman!
A big part of what made Star Wars so iconic is that there wasn't any competition for a really long time. It was a one-of-a-kind sort of thing. And if you think about what's popular now, a kid that's interested in sci-fi fantasy is probably gonna like Guardians of the Galaxy. Because if you really look at it, the three trilogies, they're not even the same rating or genre of movie. I mean, sure, they're all science fiction, but the originals were PG, family-friendly sci-fi fantasy. The prequels were a hard PG-13 sci-fi drama. There was very little fantasy, but lots of politics. And the newest movies are PG-13 sci-fi action. Again, not much fantasy, but more action and more conflict. All these movies are very different from each other because they're all made like 15 years apart. So each set of movies is technically being made for a new generation of audience. But what I think Disney needs to do if it wants Star Wars to succeed is they have to adjust the style of the movies to the times. We want to see a more intense and realistic Star Wars. We want, you know, Rogue One, Vader in the hallway type of action. And they can make other genres of movies in the Star Wars universe. They can make a horror movie or a spy film. I mean, Rogue One was kind of a war movie, and everyone seemed to like that. It was a little bit more gritty and it had a modern feel to it. And I'd have to see the first season before I can say for sure, but The Mandalorian, at least from the trailer, it looks like exactly what I'm talking about. It looks more intense and realistic. It looks like a rated R Star Wars show. And I know it's not going to be rated R, but it has a gritty realism that I think Star Wars fans are looking for. It looks like what I thought Solo should have looked like. Solo had too much comedy and it was trying to copy the tone of the originals, and I think that was the problem. That's what I'm talking about here. Because I honestly think Solo was an okay movie. It was just made like 20 years too late. And it should have just been a heist movie. Basically, Ocean's 11 or Fast and Furious. $100 million, streamline the script to a smaller story and let the characters' interactions and personalities carry the movie. Because Solo was already an outdated type of character. You know, that style and attitude was only cool in the 70s and 80s. And for a lot of people, The Force Awakens was the first time seeing him. And there was nothing interesting or cool about him in that movie. I think the interest in Star Wars is fading, but that's only because we're tired of seeing 1970s movies shot with 2019 cameras.